Good evening, everybody. It is 9 o'clock on Saturday night, and this is Starfleet Tactical, and I'm Chris Weave, and I'm supposed to have Alec Peters with me here tonight. Alec's not here right now. I don't know where Alec is, but of course, as you all know, Alec spends a lot of time doing animal rescue stuff, so it's entirely possible that he's off doing animal rescue, and he's focused on that, and that's perfectly fine. So I tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and start talking about what I was going to talk about. Potentially, it's a two-volume or two-episode talk anyway. And so with that in mind, I'll go ahead and do it. And Alec's part would be at the end anyway. And so maybe we'll end up with Alec on next week. But let me go. Or the other possibility is he might just be taking a nap because he does that. Okay, so I'll go ahead and start in just a second. Let's see. That's about right. Okay, so I reorganized this a little bit. The first part is, let's take a look at the schedule here. My schedule is going to be in flux because I'm getting ready to move and buy a house and start a new job and do all those things. I tried to buy a house last week. Last Friday night, I came very, very, very close to buying a house. I just missed it. And it would have been a great place. It would have been plenty big enough for me. It would have had all sorts of, it was exactly what I was looking for, except for the fact the yard was too big. But I did not get it. And I don't have a good plan B on that, other than I need to keep looking. So between buying a house and moving, etc., my schedule's in flux, although I do know that I am available next week. And I definitely know that I'm not available on 21st of June because that is the Weave family reunion. So if I'm going to be not doing home stuff, I know that I'm going to be in Iowa. So I'm either going to be in Iowa or doing home stuff. The rest of it, it's kind of reply hazy, try again later. I think that I should be moved by, I really, really hope to be moved by the end of June. And so I think that by the time June rolls around, it's probably, I may not start the new job for a little bit, but I think by the time June rolls around, I should be mostly available. But we don't know yet. So it's all up in the air. I reorganized the in the queue stuff because, you know, I used to say the 5 things I sort of had in the batter's box, and that list just kept on growing. I really need to sort of take some of this stuff, and I do have like multiple sheets of paper and stuff that I have all this stuff written down on. But I wanted to sort of share it with you guys to see, you know, sort of prime the pump a little bit. But I've reorganized it a little bit because there's some stuff that for instance, that stuff down at the bottom, that all depends upon guest availability. The Franz Joseph design things, I really want Pat here for that. And so it depends upon finding some time when Pat is not busy flying his sky bus someplace and not busy getting to spending time with his wife on a Saturday night. So finding time when Pat is available is kind of hard. The replicators in post-scarcity economics, I really want to do that with Andy Presby because for at least the second part of that talk, whether it ends up being one session or two, the second part of that is really kind of an Andy Presby, how do replicators work sort of deal. And so if I break that into 2 parts, I may not need him for the first part, but regardless, I want him available for the replicator part. And the Star Trek Power Systems talk is really Andy's talk. So that's just going to be me turning it over to him and saying, Andy, floor is yours. And so that's probably 2 sessions at the very least. And so I'm waiting for him to come around for those. Some of these just require a bunch of reading, like the Jovian Chronicle stuff. There's like 6 books I have to read for that. Navies and Traveler, there's at least 6 books I have to read for that. History of ship types, there's a bunch of extra research that goes along that when I do each of the individual ship types. 2300, there's probably not 6 books, but it's probably 4 that I have to read for that. So those are all topics that I just need to put nose to the grindstone and work on. The other stuff are more quick turn stuff. So for instance, I've been working on my aircraft carriers in Space Talk. I've got it as a multi-part version now. You guys have actually me doing it on the show is what sort of led me to redo that talk. So a lot of it is stuff that you've seen before, but I'm trying to make it fit a little bit better, improve the graphics, do all that sort of stuff. So you'll see stuff that you recognize in that, but you'll also see stuff that's new. And I've actually got a couple of other ideas. Like one of them is there's a GAO report on heavy versus light carriers from 1998. And I want to incorporate some of the stuff in there. There's some interesting stuff on fighters and stuff like that. One other thing that I probably should have included in there that I didn't is something on non-reciprocal combat things. It's basically rock, paper, scissors. Because there are real world examples of rock, paper, scissors in terms of unit types, etc. And I want to do some thinking about applying that to science fiction. I want to do the Akira class deep dive. I gave you like the 5-minute version of that at one point. But I really want to do a deep dive on why I think the Akira class exists and why I think it was specifically designed to fight the Borg. And all those photon torpedo tubes implies that it's, to me, that it's designed to fight the Borg, and I'll go into that in more detail. JBot, you may recall, is a website that does some very, very good Star Trek blueprints, and I've looked at some of his stuff in the past, and I just want to go pull blueprints down and do them one at a time and go through some of the really cool designs that are on there and sort of give you my views on that. Like I always say, these are my opinions, not any employers, and that includes everybody else. If I'm talking about somebody who's still alive, I'm interpreting their work, and they don't necessarily agree with that. I did actually play a game with Mike Bosworth, who you may recall was involved in a couple of shows, and I told him, hey, by the way, I owe you an apology. I did a bunch of stuff involving your work and didn't tell you in advance, and it took 6 months to get to you at all. And so with that in mind, I did talk with him about it. He hasn't had a chance to go look at it yet. And any images I put in here are intended for critique purposes and educational purposes. They are not intended as copyright infringement. I am not, trying to lay any claim to any of that stuff. Let's see. Alec said, oh shit, hold on. When you can, Alec. All right, so he'll be on in just a minute. Okay, so the agenda for tonight is we're going to look at the Daedalus-Class ship. The Daedalus is very interesting. Daedalus goes back to the very, very, very beginning of Star Trek. Actually, it goes back to before it was on the air. And so we're going to look at the Daedalus-Class. I'm going to look at Matt Jefferies' original view of that. I'm going to look at some fan and other versions of it. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on the Starfleet Museum version of it, and then we're going to look at Daedalus in Axanar. And so I want to ask Alec, is this the Axanar verse? Is it the Axaverse? Is it the Axanar timeline? I kind of like the Alexanar universe as being the title. I'm going to start using that, I think. Then I'm going to give you a page worth of my thoughts on the Daedalus. Note where it says Matt Jefferies' original there. In fact, I'll go ahead and go to that. Matt, actually, I'll go back for a second. Matt Jefferies' original, you'll notice the apostrophe S. Before anybody complains, read Strunken White Rule 1. That is correct. That version is correct. Okay, so what exactly is the Daedalus-Class? Everybody agrees that in the timeline, etc., that it's a United Earth design. It goes back to the Romulan War era. It's a really old ship. But in the real world, it's actually the earliest ship design that we know about, because this is the design that Matt Jefferies was originally. Come on in, Alec.
Hey. Sorry, totally spaced on what time it was.
That's totally okay. I offered everybody the explanation that you were probably out rescuing a cat or a dog, and you could have just gone with that and everybody would have believed it.
Which would probably be true. I mean, that's like if you on the wheel of what's Alec doing right now, if you throw a dart and it hits cat rescue, it's probably pretty close.
Yeah. So I went ahead and started, talked a little bit about the schedule, and I'm going through sort of the history of the Daedalus-Class. Let me back up a couple of slides. Oh, one slide. There's basically what I'm going to go through tonight. And I'm not going to try to spend a whole lot of time like all those ones, the fan versions, etc. That's like one slide each, just to give people an idea of what it is, because the Daedalus-Class is something that's been reinterpreted like a shit ton of times.
Yeah.
Note, shit ton, 1,000 shit kilograms. So it's everybody and their brother has done a version of the Daedalus-Class, and the Daedalus-Class is about as ugly a ship as it gets. But it's really kind of a favorite. Everybody wants to do a Daedalus-Class. And I think my hypothesis for that, it's because it's so damn functional.
Yeah.
It just it looks like the sort of thing like, we got to build a shitload of starships. Let's just throw something together as fast as we can.
So I buy into that. Absolutely. So,
but I was just explaining to people that actually the Daedalus-Class as a design, not necessarily the name, goes back to the very beginnings of Star Trek, because Matt Jefferies takes a month off to like go overseas or something. He had been working on Ben Casey. He gets back and he's told, you're not going back to Ben Casey. You're going to go work on this thing called Star Trek that Gene Roddenberry's putting together. People think of Matt Jefferies as being this science fiction guy. He wasn't until he showed up on Star Trek. I mean, I think he paid attention to all that stuff, but it's not, his resume did not scream science fiction before he got to Star Trek.
Okay, that's interesting.
And so this design is actually in the making of Star Trek. And this was like a very, very early design. It predates the idea of like, hey, let's put a saucer on it.
Yeah.
It's about as simple as it gets, and there's lots of variations of cylinders connected to a ball that he does. You get lots of in-universe explanations as to why it looks so simple. Most of them are some variation of, we need to build a shit ton really, really fast, just use cylinders and slap them together. There's a lot of other explanations, though, that aren't necessarily consistent in terms of background, etc. All agree that it's a ship designed from around the time of the Romulan War.
Yes.
Some of the fan fiction backgrounds say it fought during the war. In fact, I believe the Axanar says that, right?
Yeah. I mean, yes, absolutely. That's our take on it. And I have just been, as an aside, but touching on this, I've been exploring the Romulan Wars a lot more the last month, because I think that's our next big project. I think when we release Axanar, I think we will have the firepower then to go out, and there's a lot of things brewing in my mind about how we're going to do it. But I think the official Star Trek will never do the Romulan War. And I think we're in a perfect position, especially considering our take on how we do these films, the documentary style mix, that we could do a great take on it. So I'm actually digging out my 2 copies of the 2 Romulan War books, the 2 Enterprise books that were done about the Romulan War, Beneath the Ragtop's Wing, and I forgot what the other one was called. And I just found them on Amazon. I haven't ordered them yet because I'm hoping I find my copies of them. But if not, I'm just gonna get the Kindle versions and reread them, because they do talk about the Daedalus-Class in those books. And honestly, I don't remember exactly how they talk about it. But I think the Daedalus-Class, just in general, and it's great to reference what you've got here, because in this slide, in that, obviously in the lower right, you see exactly the Daedalus-Class in that little invert, where he says, oh, well, if you inverted this design, it'd look like this, which is actually the Daedalus-Class. So I think it's really interesting. And I think that the question is, it's the type of thing like, oh, you might have gotten away coming up with this idea 60 years ago when Matt Jefferies did, but now it looks so freaking ridiculous. Yeah. But I think your point is, correct me if I'm wrong, but your point is that the fact that it looks so ridiculous is also one of the reasons we all love it.
Yeah, yeah. And I say here it was finally canonized in Lower Decks. It turns out after I wrote this slide, I forgot to go back and fix it. It was canonized in Deep Space Nine, in that there's a model of it that shows up in a couple of different places in Deep Space Nine.
You mean this model?
You own, is that the actual model? Ah, yes.
Yeah, this is the actual USS Horizon model that was in that was built by Greg Jean and was in Cisco. I mean, I basically have three major Cisco props, which if I can turn, you can see his computer.
Oh, cool.
All the way over there behind the Tintin rocket ship, you see his clock, his alien clock that he built.
Okay.
So yeah, because I'm a huge Cisco geek, of course. But yeah, this was the model that sat in his office. And so I almost came close to thinking about selling it, and I was like, no, it's just too important to Axanar. And so yeah, so and I have to put in the back so the cats don't knock it over. By the way, this is one of my favorites. Do you remember this from Tintin, Adventures of Tintin? I love this. I remember when I first went over to Europe in '86. Was it in '86? When I was in France, I found a shop that had these, and I tried to get them. No, they had a display version. I tried to get them to sell it to me. They wouldn't. But eventually, I found one. I think it was on eBay or something. But I have such cool memories from when I was a kid and this model. So anyway, but yeah. So the Daedalus, I believe, you place it in the Romulan War, which makes it kind of anachronistic.
Now you got me doing
anachronism.
Anachronistic.
I'm missing an N, aren't I?
Anachronistic.
Anachronistic. Okay. So that being said, I think you keep it in the Romulan War because it speaks to a ship, as you just said. You just said it. It speaks to a ship that was like, okay, we could build these like Liberty ships. We can crank these out, right? Pretty simple ship, not to as opposed to the NX class or the NX refit or whatever. So there you go. So yeah. And it was in Lower Decks. I missed it in Lower Decks, but then again, I didn't see past season 3 of Lower Decks, so I guess
to be honest, I've never actually seen Lower Decks. I just went online looking for it, and I found references to it. So everybody and their brother has decided, including my brother, not Delon, Sean. That last little thing there was my brother Sean saying, "Hey, give me a call when you got a second." So everybody and their brother has decided that 9:00 on Saturday night is the time to send me a text message. So, okay. Yeah, there's at least one source that in their background, they had it as a ship that was immediately post-war. And I'm going to get to that a little bit. And if you're thinking about Romulan War, are you familiar with starfleetmuseum.org? I think it is. Of
course.
Okay. We're going to talk about that coming up. All right, so here's a bunch of drawings that Matt Jefferies did, and you'll notice that there's all sorts of differences in the angle and exactly how things connect to things, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of this stuff is in the Making of Star Trek. That story about how Jefferies came in is directly from Stephen Whitfield's Making of Star Trek. The design process was very iterative. They would go to Roddenberry with a bunch of designs, and he'd go, "I like this from this one, and this from this one, and this from this one. Try again." And apparently it sounded like it was both stimulating and really frustrating because they went through that process multiple times, including at one point, I don't like the sphere. Put something else instead of the sphere, and that's how they ended up with the saucer. And also the book is worth it for just the thing where the memo and the Vulcan names. Do you remember that?
Yeah, absolutely. I totally devoured that book when I was a kid. I think I still have my original copy.
I still have my original someplace, and then the replacement copy, and I found one I found it online also so that I could cut and paste and do stuff like that. But for those who haven't read it, the Vulcan names memo, that's at one point, I think Roddenberry or somebody decided that all Vulcan names start with SP and end with K, and they came up with a list of all the different combinations. And so if you ever run into a Vulcan named Spook or a Vulcan named Spork, that's where it came from. I'll note, this is before sporks were a thing, I think. Okay, so here's some other designs we see. I mean, the one on the left is clearly an iteration of the Enterprise that we've come to know and love, but the ones on the right, I remember seeing these in Star Trek things. Basically, every Matt Jefferies design at some point showed up in a Star Trek property as a historical ship or something that we can do something with. Or some variation thereof. In fact, I think if you flip that top one over, isn't there a ship or two in Axanar that looks an awful lot like that?
Well, I think what I think is, I mean, kind of some of this that design kind of made it into the Kelvin verse, but
oh yeah, that's what I'm thinking about. Like the ship at the opening of the
Kelvin, the Kelvin looks, similar with only a single nacelle below it. So there I think you've gotten to the saucer shits. Like, Matt, we're going with the saucer.
Yeah. And I can give you, I'm going to give an explanation as to why I think saucers make sense later on. So this is from a fan film by a guy named Chris Lee.
Chris Lee. He's the guy who did all the visual effects for Daedalus, for our Daedalus.
Oh, really?
Yeah, exactly. So this is Chris Lee. This is one of his early projects. Basically, I kind of art directed the Daedalus. Hold on, Pee Wee's going crazy. Hold on, gotta get him in here. All right, Pee Wee. All right, where are you?
Well, while Alec's doing that, note that it's got this spine. It's got some extra supports there. It's got a little bit more detailing than what we see later on in terms of the cylinder, etc. But there's lots of little greebles and stuff like that. I actually really like this one. But I'll note one of the things about this little fan film, and I've got the link. Almost everything I mentioned, I put the link in the description so that you can go and just click on it and go watch it. This fan film, I found this fan film really frustrating to watch because I want a beauty shot. I want a shot, okay, he's bringing it by the camera. I want a beauty shot that's far enough away that I can see the entire ship, but it's always like he's got it zoomed in just a little bit too much, and part of the ship is hanging off screen, and it drove me crazy. There's only a couple of places where I could get a decent shot. And I would prefer to have one that didn't have the rings in the background because it sort of makes it harder to spot some of the interesting features and stuff. But there just aren't that many shots that you can do screen captures on. But this is a very interesting design. I really kind of liked it. So Eric Henry, E.C. Henry always does his own thing. He's got his own design language. He's reinterpreting everything. He makes no bones about it. In this particular one, he decided that he thought that the sphere up higher made it look unbalanced. And as a result, he dropped it down and then added the second support. I actually think that by doing that, he makes it look nose heavy.
It does. Yeah, it does.
I think it looks more unbalanced now than it did before. The balance was kind of weird before, but it seemed to sort of work out. Now, I love a lot of what E.C. Henry has done, but I'll note all along the way, every time he says something like that, I go, no, you're wrong. You're just wrong.
Yeah. I'm not, and I love, Eric is obviously did a lot of concept artwork for us at Axanar, and I love him. He's amazing.
I didn't know that either.
Sorry?
I didn't know that he did a bunch of concept art.
He did. He did some great work, and he's an amazing artist. He does a lot of Star Wars stuff these days. But yeah, I didn't particularly like his take on the Daedalus. I know, personal opinion, right?
So as a general rule, it is I think with all of his stuff, I look at it and I go, there are things about it that I like, but I don't necessarily like the overall, right? Like I like the idea there are these circles that you see on the side that are pop out weapons emplacements, right? If you look in the lower right hand corner, you can see there's a circle above the equator and a circle below the equator. Those are like weapons turrets, and there's some video he's got where he shows them firing and stuff like that. I really kind of like I like the sort of old school, this is a mechanical device. It's not a solid state device. It is a mechanical device. It has moving parts and they move around. And I like stuff like that. And I kind of like the fact that he doesn't have the glowing Bussard collectors, because I always thought the explanation that the glowy bit was a Bussard collector was kind of stupid. I like the glowy bit. I didn't like the explanation for it. If you're going to go with the explanation, don't make it glowy.
Right.
And so that's his thinking on that. And I kind of like, there's some stuff about this I probably would have. I can see lowering the sphere, but I wouldn't have done it as much as he did.
Yeah. I'm with you there. The other thing that makes it, anyway, it's interesting.
Yeah, and it's and I like the impulse engines where he's got them, although I sort of wonder about the angle on some of those struts. But it's I think it's a really, I like it as one of multiple interpretations. I'm not sure it's the one I would go with, but it's definitely worth mentioning. And I recommend that people go and watch Pacific 201 and watch specifically. I included the link for the 13-minute long description of why he made the decisions he did and what decisions he made and how he changed stuff, etc. I think those are all pretty good. I think these are shots from Lower Decks, but I'm not sure. It was Triangulum Audio Studios, and they do some interesting stuff, but I didn't see any place where it was credited where it came from. You can see it's got some weirdnesses in the struts and stuff like that. And so it's, another interpretation that I'm not getting all the interpretations by any stretch of the imagination. Here's another one from a guy named Ethernaut, who actually I think did some work that showed up someplace else. I'm trying to remember. An article. There was an article on the problems with the Daedalus, and that's where I found this. And this is another interpretation. It's got some different angles on it and stuff like that. And so just add it to the mix. And then, of course, there are some extreme interpretations of the Daedalus-Class. For instance, this one doesn't look like the original at all.
That's a Daedalus from Stargate.
Yes, and I put it in here mostly because we never talk about Stargate on this show, and I don't know why I don't ever talk about Stargate on this show, because I love Stargate.
Oh, so do I.
And I do talk about it in some of the aircraft carriers and space stuff I talk about, because the Daedalus is one of the examples of a hybrid carrier, where it's basically both a battleship and a carrier. And I think in some sets of assumptions that sort of thing works, and in other sets it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It does not make any sense on the surface of planet Earth, I can guarantee you that. But it does make sense in a place like, I think it makes a lot of sense in Ron Moore's Battlestar Galactica, and I've talked about that. And I won't go down that path right now because we don't have time. So I mentioned the Starfleet Museum. This is a fan project that was made obsolete when Star Trek Enterprise came out. He had a whole bunch of ship designs for that time period, and they all kind of went away because none of them are the path that they went down. But it's a fantastic website, and it's also almost unique, maybe is unique, in that you can buy the book version of the website.
Really?
Yeah, if you go there, front and center, there is a book version of it that I have in the other room.
Did I do that?
I think you did that.
Okay.
There's a book version that let me make sure. Yeah. Yeah, there's a book version of it that I've got in the other room. It's pretty good size, and it appears to be. I haven't done a full, detailed go through, but it appears to be that they just took the articles that were on the website and put them in book form. And he sells it at what he claims is his cost. He's not making any money off of it. Okay.
Yeah, I'm there now. I'm gonna have to buy one. Was it?
Yeah.
Wow, $60 for a paperback.
Yeah, it's pricey. It's pricey, but I mean, I think they're print on demand. I suspect they're print on demand. So.
Yeah, we need to get that. Yeah, that's interesting.
So here's in his background for it. So he's got an extensive write-up of the ship that's got a lot of really interesting things in his background. His claim is that it was derived from the ship up above, that the ship up above was the wartime variant called the Comet class, and that that the part of United Earth, the United Earth Space Probe Agency, which was the exploration branch, had been folded into the United Earth Stellar Navy, and that they were the space probe people were looking forward to going back to exploration. And towards the end of the war, when it became apparent that we were going to win and there was going to be a drawdown, and they went to basically the developer and said, "Hey, can you? My guess is they're going to cancel the rest of the order. Why don't you work on creating an exploration version for us? Because we're going to try to do some exploration stuff." And the shipyard went, "Okay, yeah, we'll do that." And so they were able to do it. And supposedly the ship down below is the peacetime derivative of the ship up above. And I'm having a real hard time pressing the I believe button on that.
Yeah, I agree. For the same, listen, this is for the same reason that I've never been a fan of the NX-01 refit. I just don't believe that you refit a vessel to be that radically different. You just make a new vessel.
See, I don't have a problem with the NX-01 refit. The one I have a problem with is the movie era Enterprise being.
Oh, well, yeah.
That one is just like
no,
what are you doing? I mean, the primary hull isn't the same.
No, it's not. It's not.
I mean, it's like, now there's at least one fan source that has the explanation that basically said this was the equivalent. At one point, the U.S. Navy actually really did do this. They refitted some ships that basically involved disconnect the ship's wheel, throw the ship away, bring another ship underneath, reconnect the ship's wheel to it, and they called it a refit. And I know people that have done that with houses for zoning reasons. They wanted to demolish and do reconstruction, or demolish and build.
They had to leave one wall up or something.
Yeah, and the specific example that I'm thinking of, the wall collapsed at one point, and they just quickly built a new wall.
That's funny.
And then claimed it was the old wall. So yeah, I mean, I look at this and I go, I could see more likely the idea that it was a peacetime design that they turned into a wartime design, and the version on top was basically once we started adding the bells and whistles, it became an entirely new class version. But then when you get when they get further down onto it, they basically, there was some initial ones that were going to be a pure explorer version. So there was a block 1 version that a handful of them came out as pure explorers. Then the military branch came along and said, we need more weapons. We need to have some ships that have some weapons. And so they basically did a more heavily armed version of it also, which made me wonder, like, why didn't you just buy more of the first one? So I think there's some problems in that background, but I kind of like that background overall. And this is what you end up with. That's about as classic a design as you can get. That looks an awful lot like what you did, Alec, with the exception of the rear end of it looks a little different. The Starfleet Museum background goes on to say that it was actually fairly ill-suited for the exploration mission they gave it. It was kind of small and cramped, and the reactors weren't really designed to be run for 6 years at a time for these long-duration exploration missions. And so they started having reactor problems, and that there were a lot of ships that just didn't come home, and they think it was because of the reactor. And so this led Starfleet to do things like say, hey, if we're having reactor problems, maybe we should be able to detach part of the ship. And that's where you got this idea of a detachable primary hull, is from the reactor problems that this ship was having. I kind of like that. Mm-hmm. They also say that despite the fact it was not as well suited for the job that it was given, that it had more first contacts than any other Starfleet class ever. It was the workhorse during the early days of the expansion of the Federation, and they just got rode hard and put away wet. There's some interesting blueprints there. I urge everybody to go. If you're into blueprints like I am, go to the website, take a look at them there. There's no way I can make these readable. I decided not to do it. And like I said, the ship history is pretty good too. So let's talk about Axanar. So I grabbed a bunch of screenshots. So correct me if I get this wrong, Alec, right? But from what we were saying, it sounds like the Daedalus ships had been the workhorse in the Earth-Romulan War. In fact, I think one of the characters specifically says that. Mm-hmm. But they were in mothballs by the time the 4 Years' War broke out in 80 years later.
Yep.
They needed some hospital ships, and they said, we've got a whole bunch of these things in mothballs. Let's convert them, and that they were fairly easy to convert. And they were non-combatants that spent a lot of time basically being combatants. In fact, there's lots of images of them firing phasers, which sounds kind of combatant-y to me.
So, okay, yeah. So, do you want to watch this?
Do you want to?
Yeah, let's. I've got it right here. So, let me. If you want to take away your.
Yep.
I will share.
Yeah, I was just going to point people to it, but if you want to show it, that's fantastic.
All right.
Is that okay? Is that publicly available yet?
Yeah, it is on our website.
Okay, because I went looking for it on YouTube and could only find the premiere, which is an hour.
Yeah, it's on our website right now. So, and here we go. What I'll do is we'll.
This is a galaxy-wide transmission of the United Federation of Planets. The United Federation of Planets Historical Society, in conjunction with Memory Alpha, presents Ships of the 4 Years' War, the Daedalus-Class hospital ship refit.
The Romulan War, the seminal event in the creation of the Federation as we know it. And at the forefront of that conflict, the Daedalus-Class starship.
The X-Class Warp 5 ship was the most famous class of ship in the war. The Enterprise's adventures under Captain Archer had made that ship an icon.
Well, as war was approaching with the Romulans, Earth needed to build starships, quickly, and in great numbers.
The Daedalus was designed to fill a variety of roles. Heavily shielded and hardened against the Romulan hacking of 10 years earlier, what it lacked in speed, it made up for it in flexibility and survivability.
So 80 years later, when the war with the Klingon Empire broke out, it was the logical choice to refit for hospital ships, which were desperately needed.
Well, just like the Liberty ships of the Second World War, the Daedalus-class ship was mothballed rather than scrapped. Our top technical personnel worked with the Starfleet Corps of Engineers. They put in every piece of equipment that our medical team could use. And after the refit, well, the ship had better capabilities than that of a small starbase.
Our ships have the most advanced medical facilities anywhere in the known universe.
Well, once the specs were finalized, it took less than 60 days to get the first refit launched. After that, we were launching a refit Daedalus every week. A year into the war, we ran out of hulls.
Vulcan, Andorian, human, Telluride, whatever race was coming towards us, our staff was ready to handle them.
The hospital ships were probably the greatest unsung heroes of the war.
Our crew was even ready to work on the Klingons.
And while our medical teams made up the bulk of the crew, we had Starfleet personnel manning the ships.
Many of us were disappointed to be serving on hospital ships. We wanted to be on the front lines, serving as the tip of the spear.
And by Axanar, our crews didn't just sit back and wait to receive casualties.
So we dove right in to everything but the fiercest parts of the battle, beaming out casualties and saving the lives of thousands of crew members that otherwise would have been lost.
No one wanted to be just an ambulance driver. We were Starfleet. We needed to make a difference.
So we created our own tactics to save more lives, and that often meant doing things that were somewhat unconventional.
We did a lot of things those ships were never supposed to be able to do, but it was about saving lives.
By the end of the war, over 100,000 Starfleet crew and Federation citizens have been treated on a Daedalus-Class hospital ship.
Between the lives the hospital ships saved and the dedication of the Starfleet crews, the revitalization of the Daedalus-Class became as important to the war effort as the introduction of the Ares-Class.
And so, the hospital ship USS Lanyon took its place next to the USS Daedalus and the NX-01 Enterprise at the Starfleet Museum.
Not all the legends that war created were warriors.
Please listen correctly.
We're going to turn off the sound there.
Yeah. So that was fantastic.
Yeah. So the whole idea was, I see Paul joined us there.
Yep. There he is.
The whole idea was to originally create something that was a thank you to Dave and Goodney for their work on Axanar, and so when thinking of what we could do and knowing that they were going to be visiting in October of 2023, I threw this together. I threw together a script and then got kind of like I got a new. I basically got Josh Irwin involved and got Chris Lee involved and basically let them kind of run the show, right? That way it's not a purely an Axanar production. It's really much more of a hybrid. It's our second team, and without giving a quality reference to it, it's just not the guys making Axanar, which is cool, which is what we want.
Yeah.
Because if you go to our website, now we actually have under Prelude and the Vulcan scene, we have the 4 movies made in the Axanar universe. And by the way, I use the Axanar universe, the best thing was when the lawyer from CBS, from Loeb and Loebs, the outside law firm, he wrote me this letter, and because I had said something about the Axanar universe, and he wrote me back this email. It was like, "There is no Axanar universe!" ! And I was like, "Wow, are you upset?" It's but it which tells you so much about what their problem was. Their problem was we were creating something within Star Trek that was, that was beloved. That was beloved. So anyway, but I really enjoy that. I like that piece so much because it tells a story. It's 5 minutes and it tells a story in 5 minutes.
And I like it, as a guy who I've never been on a hospital ship. I've never actually seen one pairside, but I'm become a lot more appreciative as a naval analyst and as a guy who also does some air stuff every now and then. I'm a lot more appreciative of the non-pointy nose airplane stuff. I'm a lot more appreciative of all the fact that, twice a week, the carrier battle group does an underway replenishment. And I think underway replenishment is really, really cool. And I think hospital ships are really, really cool. And I like the idea that there's something that you guys did that wasn't just focused on another thing that was, all about phasers and photon torpedoes. Don't get me wrong. I love phasers and photon torpedoes. But there's more to the story than that.
Well, listen. I would love, I would love there to be a Star Trek series that was a medical series. It's like, okay, Alex Kurtzman, this whole fucking Star Trek sitcom bullshit idea. You don't get Star Trek. Star Trek is not a fucking sitcom, right? The amount of humor in Lower Decks was really pushing the limit, but in a good way. And it was it was animated, so that was good. But we don't need a Star Trek sitcom. Who the fuck thought that was a good idea? I mean, it's just all these ideas coming out of Secret Hideout are just horrendous. And first, Section 31 and the sitcom and Starfleet Academy. How about you place you make a Star Trek series that's a medical drama? How many fucking medical dramas are on TV? Right? Now you got the Pit and you got the Intern. Was it the Intern? Whatever. It is a certain type of genre of show that is continuously interesting to people. Going back to Ben Casey. I mean, since the earliest days of TV, we have had medical dramas and they've been interesting. Well, why didn't Star Trek have a medical drama?
So here's my idea. And I admit there's parts of this that would be really hard to do without it just turning into cross-wiring the communicator to the photon torpedoes or whatever it is that they do each week. Star Trek Emergency.
Yeah.
I loved Emergency as a kid. How many bad guys are there in Emergency? I think in the entire history of the show, there's like 5 bad guys in Emergency, right? It's not about bad guys, right? It's about we're going to go solve this problem. We got this problem. If we don't solve this problem, somebody's going to die. So let's go solve the problem so the person doesn't die. And I love that show. And, I go back and whenever it pops up when I'm someplace that has nostalgia TV on in the background and an episode pops up, they're just as good now as they were then. The only thing that's different is the communications technology. Like what they had to go through to do a cell phone call was pretty amazing.
Right.
But I love the idea of doing something like that. I love the idea of there was an entire Starfleet Corps of Engineers book series. I haven't read any of them, so I'm talking about the idea as opposed to the implementation of it. But you could easily do something Starfleet Search and Rescue, right? And so where you've got the medical aspect of it, you've got a bunch of these are the people that have to, and I'm going to talk about Search and Rescue towards the end of this. The idea about you have to go in and you've got to stabilize the situation before you can even get a transporter lock. So,
get you back to your.
Yeah. Okay. So let's see. So you can go to his website. You can go to the Axanar website and watch it directly, or you can go to the live stream that they did last night, which has got a bunch of interesting people on it. I see that Paul was on it too. I will admit I put it on and I was a little tired, and I need to go back and rewatch about a half hour of it because I fell asleep during it. Because
it's one of our better live streams. It's got over 4,000 views.
Yeah, it was really good, and I was off playing a game, or I would have watched it live when it came on last night. But it was pretty. I liked what I saw. I just haven't had a chance to go back and rewatch it. But in any event, that's available on YouTube. The video is about 5 or 6 minutes long, and you can. I think it's actually 5 minutes long. I think I got that wrong. And you can watch it at the 16-minute mark or at the 1 hour and 2 minute mark. Okay, next we have. So one of the things I liked about this, and I almost pointed it out while we were rewatching it, is the inside of the ship. There is an inside of the ship, and as that ship does the flyby, you can see what you see inside those windows change. That was a nice touch.
That was a great shot. That was a beautiful shot. Chris did an amazing job.
Yeah, that was fantastic. I really, really liked that when I saw that.
Yep.
So this is something that I thought was kind of interesting. So the lower left-hand corner is from that dry dock scene where it's going into the dry dock to be refitted. The upper right-hand one, I forget where I pulled it out of, but it's post-refit. And you can see the ass end of the ship is different.
Absolutely. My thought was they're going to start having to have a lot more shuttles, right? Because of the flexibility of the humanitarian mission of the ship. So I'm like, so let's bulk up the rear. Let's make it a little different. You could see kind of the Enterprise little scoop there in the back, but and a bigger hangar door and stuff. So I thought that was an important area to pay some attention to.
Yeah, and one of the things that Starfleet standards have probably changed.
Yeah.
And so part of what they were trying to do, you'd probably grandfather in a bunch of stuff. It's like, yeah, well, we can't move major equipment spaces around. It's going to be hard enough to find places to put all the medical stuff on what's not a super huge hull to begin with. But in fact, it wouldn't surprise me if you told me that the secondary hull was a little bit longer. It looks like maybe they might have made it just a little bit longer. And that would be one way to get a bigger hangar bay, is just add another section on the back. But I expect that at a minimum, there's probably stuff where they say, okay, the standard has changed and we can do better. We need to do X, Y, Z to bring it up to modern specs, right?
Yeah.
Mil spec is different, and mil spec changes over time. And so, like, if nothing else, when we bring stuff back on board, when we take something out of mothballs, you have to make sure that there isn't like asbestos in there, or if there is, that it's well encapsulated and you don't have to worry about it. And there's certain things you need to get rid of and things like that. Just what is considered a safe working environment has changed over time. So I like the fact that those modifications were made. And so here's a couple of quotes. We've got the one about took less than 60 days to get it launched, and then they just kept pumping them out. And that I really like that this was as important as the introduction of the Ares class.
Yeah, what we wanted to do is make sure that this was viewed as an important part of a war effort, right? Whether it's rescuing ships, rescuing crews, or evacuating personnel or whatever, that the humanitarian side of this was important.
Yeah, and what this reminds me of, something that there's a book that I've started, an audio book, and I'm about maybe 100 pages into it. And it's about carrier ops in World War II, about how carriers fought in World War II. And one of the comments made, all during the war, Japanese planes in the Pacific were much more likely to do a kamikaze attack than U.S. planes ever were. And there was an actual kamikaze program, but there was always the case of ships airplanes sort of doing suicide runs. The Japanese did not do combat search and rescue. If you went down, if you're a Japanese pilot and you went down, you're dead.
Wow.
They're not coming for you. They're just not. And so, if I knew that nobody was coming for me, I think I'd probably make sure that
your death had some meaning.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's such an interesting thing, American search and rescue, just because even that plays a part, that idea, that concept plays a part in a good number of war movies. And I think it's an important part. I mean, in the original Midway, we see the Catalina picking up what's his name? The guy that survived the first wave and watched the battle from the water.
Ensign George Gay.
George Gay. Yeah. Right. And so you see that very well. One of my favorite planes of all time was the PBY Catalina with the forward turret gun. As a matter of fact, I just saw a museum just got a hull and is restoring one. But there's that. There's the great stuff in, Bridges of Toko-Ri, that movie where Mickey Rooney plays the helicopter pilot. And then again in Flight of the Intruder, right? There's so much of that. That's an important part of the American military mission.
For what it's worth, I am not distracted. I am answering Wright's question about what the name of the book was.
I'm gonna slide forward.
And it is, let me go ahead and post it in there. It's How Carriers Fought Operations in World War II by Lars Salander. Okay. So a few thoughts that I had on this. One of them is that interesting bit about the matter-antimatter reactors being a problem on the ships that came from Starfleet Museum's version of the background, and that led them to the idea that maybe we should be able to separate the saucer section. I look at that and I go, I bet that separate the primary hull. I bet that part of their calculation was it's a lot easier to land a saucer on a planet than it would be to land a sphere. Right. Yeah. A saucer gives you some sort of aerodynamic capabilities and, blah, 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 warp field, blah, blah, blah. But it gives you some sort of ability to land that, much more likely than to be able to land a sphere in a situation where your ship may already be damaged. And so I could see that. I've also always thought, or at least recently, maybe the last year or so, I've thought that part of the reason for the saucer, I think, is that the saucer, I think they may be doing something with the underhull of the saucer to use it as a sensor mechanism. I think the underhull of the saucer, there's some really interesting scallops in the underhull of that saucer. And I think that if you blah, 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 warp field, blah, blah, that there's, you can perhaps make the argument that it's functioning as a dish. And that's why it's shaped the way it is. Now, I have a little bit of a problem with the Liberty ship analogy because it works from the standpoint that we built a metric shit ton of Liberty ships, and they were cheap and easy to manufacture, and they're exactly the sort of thing that you'd want to do in wartime. But we didn't really mothball them after the war. We got rid of them.
There were a number of Liberty ships up in San Francisco.
There were?
Yeah.
I'm surprised. I thought we sold them all.
No, there was a ton of them. I remember back in the, I
stayed corrected on that. I thought,
I guess it was there. It probably that was the early 90s that I was driving through, and it was north of San Francisco. And I saw a bunch of them. That's probably easily researched.
So we talk about Liberty ships. There was actually a couple of different flavors of freighters, and then there was the tankers. The tank, how Aristotle Onassis got his start? He bought surplus World War II tankers.
Oh, that's interesting.
Started moving oil around in them.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of the Greeks did that. They bought surplus World War II stuff, and that's how they built their shipping empires, because we didn't have the use for all that stuff anymore. And so we were selling it really, really cheap. And a lot of those ships, the record for them building a Liberty ship is at one point a shipyard built a Liberty ship in 3 days.
What?
They built it in 3 days. Now,
I don't know how that's possible.
It was a gimmick, right? They staged everything, and then they went and did it. They worked 24-hour shifts, and they did everything they needed to do, but they built it in 3 days. Would you buy a ship that had been built in 3 days?
Yeah, no.
There was actually a design flaw that between the way the stresses were and the type of metal they used, there were several instances of Liberty ships just splitting in half.
Oh gosh.
While they were pierside, they weren't even underway. They just went crack and they split in half. And it took a while to figure out what was going on with that. So, but that's one of the reasons why Liberty ships, you know, maybe we did mothball some I didn't realize we had, but they didn't last very long because they were built to wartime standards, which is we need a lot of ships right away. Now, paradoxically, sometimes things that were intended as wartime expedients lasted forever. The Brits built the, I can't remember the name of it. Their light carrier class that the USS Melbourne, I think it was, the Australian carrier was one, and the Brazilians ended up with one. They built this class of light carriers that were intended as wartime expedients. The plan was they were going to throw them away at the end of the war, and a couple of those ships were in service until like the late 1990s or later.
Wow.
Despite the fact that they were intended as wartime expedients, they were not built to full up mil spec standards. They were a little bit lightly constructed because they needed, you know, you need fewer welds. We need to get this thing out.
Let me, so just.
Sure.
Here's what I came up with, just doing a quick Google search. You'll see Liberty ships were mothballed along with other surplus vessels, and the one that they talk about here is this is the one I'm referring to, Suisun Bay Reserve Fleet, and I'm guessing this is the here we go. This was let me read. So here you go.
Yeah.
So so they were and they're well, there you go. I guess they're with the Iowa there. But and you can see it here. This is the Suisun Bay Reserve Fleet in 1962. I mean, that's 340 vessels at anchor. And that's kind of what I remember. You know, I have such a vivid memory of driving over the bridge and looking out and seeing all those ships and going, holy shit, that's a metric fuck ton of ships.
Yeah. So now I need to pull the thread and figure out why I thought that they had gotten rid of all those. Because maybe it was just that they didn't last very long after that. That the ones that they actually passed on didn't last very long. Yeah, the ones that they sold.
Let's we need to move along since.
Yep. This is actually the last slide.
Oh, okay.
So modifications for the 4 years war. Okay, adding medical facilities.
I absolutely transporters, because I would think that
I'm not sure I'd want to get on an 80-year-old transporter.
Oh yeah, well they reinstalled bulk transporters, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I also, I took this specific clip because I thought of this the second I saw it. It's like, wow, that's if they're towing ships around, that implies to me that they've got pretty extensive engineering facilities to do stuff with those ships. And I could easily see a situation, and this goes into the crew thing, the next bullet, right? You're going to need medical people, but you might actually need engineers, and you're probably going to need dedicated search and rescue teams. And it's easy enough to say, oh, they don't need any of that stuff. They just got transporters, etc. But I'm not sure that works in an environment where you've got a ship that's undertaken heavy damage. It's got gear on it that's not working properly. And we're talking about a lot older technology. I would expect there'd be lots of situations where the transporter chief says, yeah, I can't get a lock because there's just too much weird shit going on over there. I can't get a lock. There's too much radiation. There's too much random electrical discharges, et cetera, et cetera. You're going to have to send people in maybe beam them onto a part of the ship that isn't having all those issues, and they're going to have to do search and rescue stuff to go get people out.
Right.
And so those are all the sorts of things that I would expect that would have to be done. You are the god of this little universe. What did they do with these ships after the war?
I haven't put any thought to that. What I do think though is that that the hospital ship is, I don't think that's something you rapidly decommission. Yeah, I think the war left a lot of wounds, and a lot of devastated planets, I'm sure, right? And so I got to believe that these ships worked, for years and years. It's what it's like. It's like I would say it's like fire engines. Like there are fire engines from the 60s that are still working, right? It's at some point, maybe you pass it down from LA County down to the Inland Empire or whatever. You give it to where it's, as you get the newer models in, but I don't think it necessarily goes out of style. So what I'm going to if I can, let me show you a couple more things. One, I'm surprised you didn't show is oh wait, don't I have it up as?
And while you're doing that, I'm going to agree with Armano. It was indeed the Colossus-class light aircraft carrier that I was thinking of. And note, light aircraft carriers are different from escort carriers. Light aircraft carriers are intended to be like, they're just a smaller version of a regular carrier. Escort carriers were sort of their own thing. And so light aircraft carriers are built on military hulls. Escort carriers are built on freighter hulls.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. So there's this. Which was done by the guy I
didn't find that.
Matt Cushman, yeah, who's done. Who actually? I guess Matt was the guy that did the USS Ares breakaway. And so, that I think this is a pretty good piece of reference material, which I'm going to save onto my desk. The other one is just showing a couple that I've got a couple other. Let me show you, and then I'll show you. Okay. So here's, so this was one of my favorite, which was a guy named Meg Koifish had just done this beautiful and this is old. This is, he did this picture a good 10 years ago. But here's a couple really cool ones.
That is good. I like that.
Yeah. So there are those. And then the other one is, which you can find on the internet, is a picture of my model there. And I think this is in the art director's office during Enterprise. So this is what really solidifies the provenance of that piece. So yeah, and I think, was there anything else I had here? Yeah, that's it. Those are a couple of things I just wanted to share. So there you go.
That looks good.
Yeah. Checking out.
Let's see.
That's interesting. Yeah, right. It's just like what you need.
Yeah, I can see that.
Rid of ambulances. I mean, it just doesn't make sense not to use them somewhere somehow. So yeah.
If nothing else, it wouldn't surprise me if a few of them weren't just permanently docked at a space station.
Yeah, I mean, you never know when something like that comes in handy, right?
Yeah.
By the way, there were over 2,700 Liberty ships were built.
Yeah, it's just amazing.
I'm always amazed by how many aircraft carriers the U.S. pumped out, like 150 or something.
Yeah, it was at the end of they made like 100 escort carriers.
Yeah, right. I know, it's insane. It's insane.
And as part of that, we were still producing Wildcats at almost the end of the war. Even
really?
Yeah, and the reason why is the Hellcat was a lot bigger airplane, and so the Hellcat couldn't really fly off of the escort carriers, and so we were pumping out Wildcats to fly off the escort carriers, and we were pumping out P-40s late in the war too, because part of the deal was, is if you to retool a production line, you had to take it offline for like 8 months or something like that,
right?
And in some of these cases, so there's a lot of airplanes that get a very bad rap because they fail at a particular thing, but they may be very successful in everything else. For instance, the P-39 Air Cobra is not the airplane that you want to be doing a lot of high altitude stuff. But guess what? The Russians didn't do anything at high altitude. The Russians were a very low altitude force, and the P-39 Air Cobra was a perfectly fine airplane at low altitude.
Yeah, I always liked that. I always thought it was a cool plane. But and also, understanding that we're producing stuff and shipping it to the Soviet Union, right?
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of stuff. So
there was stuff where we kept building airplanes just because it's like, we'd rather have more of this, but we don't have enough engines. So we're locked into the old engine anyway. And so, like the Rolls-Royce Merlin, we couldn't make enough Rolls-Royce Merlins for all the airplanes that used it. It was used in the Lancaster. It was used in the Spitfire. I think it was the Lancaster, one of the 4-engine bombers that the Brits.
I think the Lancaster had it.
It was used in the P-51 Mustang. It was used in the Mosquito. And it is arguably the thing that led to one of the things that led to the Brits winning the Battle of Britain. Yeah, he said that they had better medical facilities than most. Yes, totally agree, yeah. Paul. Totally agree. But it's like, even in some cases, there's a great YouTube channel called Greg's Airplanes and Automobiles. It is fantastic.
Okay, I'll have to check.
He gets into the nuts and bolts, primarily about airplanes. He's a rated pilot. He is he works in the aviation industry. He's got a side business doing performance mods for cars. So like if your Ferrari just isn't performing the way that you want it to, he's the guy to talk to make the engine better. And he's really into World War II airplanes. And so like he did an entire episode on, would the P-39 have been better if it had had the Rolls-Royce Merlin instead of the Allison engine? And the answer was, if I remember correctly, the answer is no, not really.
Wow.
Because even though the Merlin was a better engine, the Allison was not the limiting factor on their airplane. And he's got like a multi-part series, 6 or 7 parts on the P-47, because he uses the P-47 as his template for explaining everything like fuel mixtures and altitude performance and dive performance and all that other stuff. So there's an entire episode just on the dive performance of the P-47, and it's like a 50 minute episode. And then he'll refer back to that later on, where he says, like, if you don't understand this stuff about why the engine mixture is important, or how turbochargers work, or how superchargers work, go watch the P-47 supercharger episode. And so it's a fantastic YouTube series, and a recurring theme there is that like if you're talking about engine performance, but you're not talking about the altitude, you're not really talking about engine performance, because the altitude makes such a big difference. And airplanes that were fantastic at 10,000 feet might be dogs at 50,000 or not 50, sorry, 20. Might be dogs at 20,000 feet or vice versa.
Deadeye says, I was in air traffic control of the U.S. Air Force. I love the A-10 said here they want to retire them. They're not retiring them.
No, they've got to. They've got to.
I heard they just upgraded a whole bunch of them.
No, and they've got to, and they should. Okay, for the same reason that they retired the F-4 Phantom, right? It was a fantastic airplane that did a fantastic job at a very specific time, right? And so the problem is that time was the 1980s, and for the problem that they had in the 70s and 80s, it was a very, very good answer, right? But the thing is, nobody's going to use that in a high-tech war anymore because the surface-to-air threat's gotten a lot worse. The idea that you're going to go Bert somebody, you're just not going to do that. That's not how they've been using that airplane for 2 decades now. It is not about the gun anymore. And so that gun is huge. That gun is 21 feet long.
Fuck.
When you include the ammo handling, because I did some research when I was an intern in the Pentagon. I did some research on, could you take that gun and put it on a ground vehicle? The answer is no, you can't.
Yeah, no, right?
It's the gun itself and the ammo handling mechanism. Because if you're going to fire like 3,000 rounds a minute, you need a pretty beefy mechanical system just to feed rounds into it.
Yeah, right.
And it catches the brass afterwards. So it fires the round and then it feeds the brass back in. It doesn't dump it over the side.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating.
And so, the entire mechanism is 21 feet long. The other thing is those planes are old.
Oh, yeah.
And the reason why we're able to keep the B-52 flying is because B-52s were basically hewn out of solid chunks of metal. The B-52 is the most over-engineered airplane on the planet. It's basically a building with wings, and it's really over-engineered. And as a result of that, they're able, every time they go and they test the airframes, they go, nope, still good. Nope, it's still good. But that's not true of everything. And eventually, like, they got rid of the A6s because they were at the point where if we don't get rid of these things, we're going to start killing pilots and job lots.
Yeah.
Because the wings were about to start. They had a couple of incidents where it's like, oh, the wing is falling off. That's not supposed to do that. And the answer is they had a lot of stress on them, and they had just gotten to the metal fatigue limit. So
another plane I love. I love the A6.
I love the A6. I love the F-14.
Yeah.
The thing with the F-14 is even when it was brand new, it was a hangar queen.
Yeah.
And the F-18, you just pull a box and put a new one in.
I know. I got to get going.
Yeah, I do too. So the one last slide was that you should all go watch this because I didn't know we were going to.
There you go. Yeah. Just go to axanar.com and you'll see it right there on the homepage, guys. Also, if you're so inclined and you want to buy anything in the Axanar store, we have I put a discount code up of Daedalus. Just use the discount code Daedalus. It's 25% off most items except for like the model kits. But the month.
I went to the store. I was looking at the stuff going, oh, I should get this. I should get this. I should get this. And then I went, maybe I should go check to see whether I already have it. And I decided not to buy a third copy.
Thank you. Well, good for you. Yeah. Matter of fact, I do have to show you this. I think I've got a couple model kits here that I've got to build. And I don't buy model kits anymore. But
while you're doing that, I'll show my latest acquisition, which is a book called The 2001 File that is basically all the drawings.
Oh, nice.
From 2001.
Very nice.
And the book is monstrous.
Well, let's see what the book look like. We'll show me the 2001. I've seen that. I got this model for Crystal. This is hysterical. It is a Hello Kitty mech figure.
Yes.
It's I think fortunately I think I'm in luck in that it is a snap together kit, so I have to put that kit together, and then I'm all into the super deformed kits, and they have some great airplane kits, but I had to get this one. They had one of the Stewart tank, a little super deformed Stewart tank, and which I absolutely loved. And what was hysterical is I also got, for an additional $5 from Australia, the metal barrel. They make a special custom metal barrel kit for this model. I was like, okay, why not?
Why not? It's only $5.
It's $5, yeah. So I got a couple model kits I need to get building. So there you go. But I have to go. Thank you so much for having me tonight.
Thank you for doing it. And as I always say, I am incredibly humbled by the fact that so many people are willing to spend their Saturday evening listening to me talk. And so thank you, Alec, for being on the show.
As always, a pleasure.
And thank you, everybody, for watching. And I look forward to seeing you all soon. Talk to you later. Bye.
Cheers.